Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. 2 days after election results were out, hectic politicking is on in New Delhi. The opposition won't try to form the government. The incumbent is on course to lead for a third term. But this time, Prime Minister Modi will have to accommodate allies. Allies were making big demands, special packages and cabinet berths. Can the BJP work out a formula that is acceptable to all? Who will get which ministry? There's a lot of speculation and reports. We'll tell you what's brewing. Also, Prime Minister Modi has invited leaders from the neighborhood to attend his swearing-in ceremony. We'll decode the move and the message. Taiwan's president congratulated Modi. He responded. Why is China so upset about this? We'll tell you. Also, looking at the BJP's UP setback, what happened there? And what does India's 18th Lok Sabha look like? We'll bring you a special report. We're also tracking the top global news. Why Russia has designated the US as an enemy state and is dispatching troops to the Caribbean. How West African countries are pushing out Western troops and Moscow is taking their place. Why Canada has designated India its second biggest threat after China. Why Israel bombed a school in Gaza and called it a legitimate target. And what is Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif doing in China? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. The Netherlands kicks off the 4-day European Parliament elections. Most of the European Union's 27 nations will go to the polls on Sunday. More than 350 million people will be voting in this election. Surveys suggest the far right could get a quarter of the seats. German Chancellor says serious criminals should be deported. Olaf Scholz's remark comes after an Afghan asylum seeker stabbed a police officer to death. Germany had stopped deportations to Afghanistan in 2021. It also does not deport people to Syria. The European Central Bank cuts its interest rate for the first time since 2019. The key deposit rate was lowered by a quarter point to 3.75%. The EU is the second major global economy after Canada to cut its lending rate this week. Nvidia overtakes Apple as the world's second most valuable company. Its stock market valuation hits the $3 trillion mark. In 2024, the artificial intelligence chip maker's stock has surged by 147%. Microsoft remains the world's most valuable company. And the reigning world chess champion speaks to Firstpost. The Chinese grandmaster talks about his upcoming face-off with D. Gukesh. This is Ding Li Zhen's first ever interview to an Indian news platform. We begin with India, where the new government is taking shape. There's a lot of buzz and speculation. Going by the latest reports, Narendra Modi will take oath of office for a third time this Sunday, 9th June. And it isn't all smooth sailing. His new allies are pushing his party for meaty cabinet seats and concessions. There's been a lot of back and forth today. Let's fill you in on the latest. The BJP has secured support from all its partners. The alliance called NDA holds for now. The opposition won't make a bid to form the government. They say they'll make the appropriate move at the appropriate time. So Modi is on course to begin his third term as Prime Minister of India. He has the numbers, but he also has difficult allies. They're making a lot of demands. We start with Chandrababu Naidu, the leader of the TDP. This party has won 16 seats in the Lok Sabha. And thereafter, plum positions in the cabinet. Now, none of this is on the record, but according to multiple reports, these are Chandrababu Naidu's demands. He wants up to 6 seats in the Council of Ministers. He's eyeing ministries like finance, roads, health and education. He also wants the post of Lok Sabha Speaker. That is the chair of the lower house of parliament. The TDP wants it. Another demand is more development funds for his state, Andhra Pradesh. He wants preferential financial assistance and economic concessions like tax breaks. Broadly, this is known as a special status. Right now, 11 states in India enjoy this kind of special status. They get all these concessions. Chandrababu Naidu wants the same for his state. He wants Andhra Pradesh to become the 12th Indian state with a special status. Then we come to the BJP's other important ally, the JDU, the Janata Dal United, that's Nitish Kumar's party. He is the Chief Minister of Bihar. His party has won 12 seats and Nitish Kumar wants to leverage these numbers. Reports say he has demanded 3 cabinet positions and he is eyeing coveted portfolios like the railways. Remember, Nitish Kumar himself served as India's railways minister back in the 1990s. He was part of the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. So railways is on his wish list again. What else does he want? Rural development, transport and agriculture ministries. The JDU is said to have demanded these. They also want to influence the legislative agenda. Observers say Nitish Kumar could push for a common minimum program for the NDA, which is basically a document that spells out the agenda for the alliance. And what does he want in this common minimum program? The JDU is said to have 2 broad demands. Number 1, the review of the Agniveer scheme. That's the new military recruitment policy which the outgoing government had introduced. This scheme reduced the number of permanent recruits in the armed forces of India. So soldiers would be hired for 4 years and only 25% of them would be retained for the long term. That was the scheme. Now, Nitish Kumar's party says this led to a lot of resentment and they want a review of the Agniveer scheme. The BJP has not commented, but the opposition is not missing the opportunity to corner the government on this.
सरकार को स्वीकार करना चाहिए कि उनकी गलती है, उन्हें अग्निवीर जैसी व्यवस्था नहीं लानी चाहिए। अखिलेश केवल अग्निवीर व्यवस्था खत्म होनी चाहिए, बल्कि बहुत से नौजवान जिनको रोजगार नहीं मिल पाया, फौज में जाना चाहते थे, उन्हें उम्र की छूट भी देनी चाहिए।
So the new government could face a pushback on Agniveer from both the NDA and the opposition. That's one demand of the JDU. The second one is about UCC. The Uniform Civil Code, UCC, it's something that the BJP has long promised to implement. This is basically a common set of laws for all citizens, regardless of their religion. This would cover areas like marriage, divorce and inheritance. Currently, India has different sets of personal laws, influenced by customs of different religious communities. The BJP government wanted to bring a uniform civil code. In the last 10 years, they did not do it. And now Nitish Kumar may have some ideas. Apparently, he is not opposed to this idea of UCC, but he wants a consensus-based approach. He wants to bring everyone together before this is implemented, so he could play an important role in determining the future of this reform. Now, that's a lot of preconditions and demands from the BJP's 2 top allies, but that is not the end of the list. There are smaller partners too, and they too have expectations. Like the Shiv Sena, they won 5 seats from Maharashtra, and Chirag Paswan's LJP, Lok Janashakti Party, which has again won 5 seats. The NDA may have to accommodate all of these allies. The picture should be clearer by tomorrow. Today, 3 top BJP leaders met. That's Home Minister Amit Shah, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and BJP President JP Nadda. They're apparently working on a formula for cabinet formation. There is speculation that they will offer 1 ministerial position for every 4 elected MPs. Their allies too held internal deliberations. Both Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu met with their respective elected MPs from their parties. Tomorrow, the NDA will meet again, the entire alliance. This will happen inside the parliament. All elected MPs of this alliance, some key state-level leaders and office bearers are invited for this meeting. So the NDA alliance is coming together. What about the opposition bloc, the India bloc? They are positioning themselves to take the role of the opposition. Again, there is intense speculation here because Congress leaders want Rahul Gandhi to step up. They want him to become the leader of opposition. The Congress has the most number of seats in the opposition camp. So this position, leader of opposition, or LOP as it's called, will come to the Congress. And Congress leaders think that Rahul Gandhi should challenge Prime Minister Modi head on. In the past, he shied away from taking a frontline role. During both the UPA governments, when the Congress was in the lead position, in 2004 and again in 2009, Rahul Gandhi did not take any position within the government. So this time, will he become the leader of opposition? He hasn't said anything publicly, but today he opened a new front against the BJP. He called a press conference not to discuss the election result, but to discuss India's stock markets and the crash that they saw on result day, on the 4th of June. Rahul Gandhi tried to corner the government on this. He targeted those who were behind the exit polls. He made a direct charge against the Prime Minister and his top ministers. He accused them of inflating stock values ahead of the result.
These investors are given a completely wrong impression. And on the 3rd of June, as we all know, the stock market breaks all records and then crashes on the portal. Whoever has made money as the stock market rose and also as the stock market crashed. And we are interested in having a joint parliamentary committee, a JPC, to investigate the role of the Prime Minister, the role of the Home Minister, role of BJP members.
Later in the evening, the BJP responded to Rahul Gandhi's charges. They accused him of misleading investors.
फिर एक बार मोदी सरकार आना निश्चित है और शायद इस बात से राहुल गांधी जी बड़े परेशान नजर आते हैं और अपने बयानों के साथ विदेश और देश के निवेशकों को एक भय के वातावरण में निवेश ना करें इसके लिए उत्साहित करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं.
Well, this could just be the beginning. The opposition with bigger numbers is sharpening its attacks on the government. The elections may be over in India, but the politics is only heating up. So the new NDA is taking shape, but what about its policies? A lot will depend on the major allies, especially the TDP and the JDU. But that's mostly domestic policies. On foreign policy, Prime Minister Modi is likely to retain a firm grip. And we are already seeing evidence of that. He has invited neighbouring heads of state to the swearing-in ceremony. 6 countries have got the invite from New Delhi. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, the Maldives and Mauritius. 6 countries. And how many of these are attending? Well, just one leader is in doubt, and that's Mohammad Muizzu of the Maldives. But chances are he too will attend. If he doesn't, it would be a monumental snub. I'm sure some of this sounds familiar, this whole plan. It should sound familiar because Prime Minister Modi has done this before. In 2014, he invited neighbouring heads of state to the swearing-in. It was seen as a big foreign policy message that India's focus would be on the neighbourhood. 10 years later, Modi is doing it again. He's bringing back the old gang, but 2 countries are missing this time. The first is Afghanistan. In 2014, Afghanistan was ruled by a civilian government, so former President Hamid Karzai attended the swearing-in ceremony in New Delhi. Today, the Taliban rule Afghanistan, so there is no question of inviting them. The second missing guest is Pakistan. In 2014, Nawaz Sharif flew down to India. These pictures of him and Modi on stage were quite powerful. They gave hope of a reset. But no such outreach this time, and with good reason. Pakistan is yet to send a message to Prime Minister Modi. No well wishes, no felicitations, not even an acknowledgement. Compare that to India's position. Pakistan had a totally rigged election in February this year, yet Prime Minister Modi congratulated Shehbaz Sharif. But no such courtesy so far from the other side. So what's the message here? What is Prime Minister Modi trying to say? First is a message of control, sort of like saying that coalition or not, business goes on. Many leaders would have done the opposite. Your party has lost majority, the opposition has done well, you may decide to downsize the swearing-in, but Modi is not doing that. He's basically saying all is well. The second message is to the neighbourhood, that India is back. You have an India out movement in the Maldives, a boycott India movement in Bangladesh, a Chinese debt trap in Sri Lanka and major Chinese designs in Nepal and Bangladesh. Even Bhutan is looking shaky. They're negotiating a border deal with China. So the neighbourhood is a bit divided. So what does Modi do? Bring them together for his swearing-in. It's a political and symbolic gesture, an acknowledgement of the recent setbacks and a promise to work on them. But within this invite, you also see priorities. For starters, the decision to include the Maldives. It's a very positive move. Muizzu's ministers have insulted Prime Minister Modi. Indian soldiers have been expelled from the country, yet New Delhi is not giving up. That sends a strong message to Muizzu. It also puts the ball in his court. because what happens next is his call. Muizu can use this event to reset his relations with India. And if he doesn't, well, India can always say, we tried. Another message is to Pakistan: no more free resets. Modi made multiple overtures to Islamabad. He invited Nawaz Sharif to his swearing in. He even attended his granddaughter's wedding in Lahore. And what did he get in return? Yet another betrayal. So Modi is keen to not repeat this mistake. His message to Pakistan is quite clear: end terrorism, then we will talk. And Sunday's event will send a strong message to Islamabad. Just imagine the optics. All South Asian leaders standing together and united. But no Pakistan in the picture. It would symbolize their isolation in the region. Having said all this, I must give a disclaimer. Well begun is only half done. You cannot rely on optics alone. You need to produce results. Whether it's investments in Nepal and Bhutan, or resolving the Teesta dispute with Bangladesh, or propping up the Sri Lankan economy. If not, this outreach may not pay off. Guess who's trying to jump into this election buzz? China. The Chinese have stirred up a new row. Today, their officials made two statements, two direct attacks on India's foreign and economic policies. The first one revolves around a social media post. Let's show it to you. The post from Prime Minister Modi. He's responding to Lai Ching-te, the new president of Taiwan. Lai Ching-te congratulated Prime Minister Modi. Here's how the Indian leader responded. And I'm quoting, "I look forward to closer ties as we work towards mutually beneficial economic and technological partnership." Now, Beijing saw this message and they threw a fit.
India has made serious political commitments regarding the One China principle and should be vigilant against the political schemes of the Taiwan authorities and refrain from actions that violate the One China principle.
They call this a political scheme. What is China so worked up about? The Indian leader's response may seem polite and generic, but there's more to it than meets the eye. This response is also a signal to China on Taiwan. In fact, last year, Prime Minister Modi issued similar signals. He called the Dalai Lama on his birthday. For the third successive year, Modi made public the details of his call. Then a special guest from Taiwan visited Dharamshala for the Dalai Lama's birthday. A Taiwanese lawmaker was allowed to attend this ceremony, and this engagement did not sit well with China. It opposes all forms of foreign contact with the Dalai Lama, but New Delhi ignored those warnings. And by the looks of it, they will continue to defy China's demands. The Prime Minister's message to Lai Ching-te, the Taiwanese leader, signals continuity in policy. Remember, there's been a change of guard in Taipei as well. Lai Ching-te became Taiwan's president just last month. But clearly, the change in leadership has not altered the course of the India-Taiwan relationship. New Delhi and Taipei do not have official diplomatic ties. India does not recognize Taiwan as a separate country. Despite that, the two sides have been working closely on areas like technology and economy. This also means that the India-China relationship is not improving in a hurry, especially if you consider what China's ambassador to India said today. His name is Xu Fei-hong. He took over the Chinese mission in Delhi just last month. And China took 18 months to appoint an ambassador to India. 18 months. In an ideal scenario, this should reflect an improvement in ties. The fact that they've finally sent an ambassador. Possibly some progress towards resolving the situation at the border. But the ambassador's tone suggests otherwise. He posted a message on X. He posted this today. He's complaining about the presence of Western cars on Indian roads. Let me quote from what he said. "So many Japanese, Korean, American and German cars on Delhi streets. Can't help but think, should all major car exporting countries be blamed for overcapacity?" It's a dig at the West. He's hinting at the dumping of Western cars in the Indian markets. Let me give you the context here. In recent weeks, tensions between China and the West have only risen. The West has been complaining about the oversupply of Chinese cars, mostly their electric vehicles. Across the shipping hubs of Europe, Chinese cars are piling up. There's oversupply and not enough buyers. So the West is mulling economic measures to slow down the imports of Chinese cars. And that is what the Chinese ambassador to India was referring to. He would like to see more Chinese cars on Indian roads. India can certainly do without that, though. The Chinese are already dumping cheap steel in India. Reports say there is a flood of Chinese steel in the Indian markets. It has touched an 8-year high. Domestic steel makers want the government of India to do something about it. Next month, India's new government will present its first budget, and the steel makers have some expectations. They want action against Chinese dumping. And we say the government should not hesitate. Yes, it will be a coalition government where different members may have different priorities, but we hope that they can all agree on one thing. China's aggression must be countered on all fronts. There's a popular saying in Indian politics, the road to Delhi goes through Lucknow. And it's always spot on. Lucknow is the capital of Uttar Pradesh. It's the most populous state in the country. So if you win Uttar Pradesh, you win Delhi. Just look at the numbers. India's Lok Sabha has 543 seats. And how many seats does Uttar Pradesh have? 80. That's 14% of the seats from just one state. In 2019, the BJP swept it. They swept UP and they won 62 out of the 80 seats. But this time, the BJP slipped up. They won just 33 seats in the state of Uttar Pradesh, 33 seats, while the opposition India bloc won 43 seats. And this was a huge setback. Uttar Pradesh has a BJP state government with Yogi Adityanath as the chief minister. It is also home to the Ayodhya Ram temple. So how did the BJP slip up? Let's focus on the Ram temple first. The BJP lost the constituency where the temple is located. It is located in the constituency called Faizabad. The BJP lost it to the Samajwadi Party. Now, just to be clear, this was not a vote against the temple. Most voters wanted the temple to be built. But it's the how that mattered. Some 800 houses in the vicinity were demolished. Around 2,200 shops were also removed. Many locals say they were not properly compensated. Some of them also say that the temple has benefited outsiders.
Our ancestors used to pray and serve Lord Ram, and all of us love him. However, there will be no employment for the locals here just by building a temple. Only the outsiders got job opportunities, and they demolished the houses of the people, and several became homeless.
So did the BJP get the sentiment wrong? Yes, the voters wanted the temple, but perhaps they also wanted a lot more, which brings us to the second factor, the economy. Look at the period from 2017 to 2021. That's the first BJP state government. Uttar Pradesh's economic output grew at 1.95%. Compare this to the previous government, it grew at 6.92%, and before that, 7.2%. So the state economy has been sluggish. A third factor is caste. It always plays an important role in UP. The BJP strategy was to ignore it. They banked on consolidating the Hindu vote to use the Modi factor to ride over caste differences. The India bloc, the opposition bloc, did the opposite. Especially Akhilesh Yadav of the Samajwadi Party. He built a coalition of backward caste groups. Then he hammered home two messages. First, that the India bloc would do a caste census, and second, that the BJP would end caste reservation. That's what he told the voters. Both messages clearly found takers, maybe more than the opposition expected. Look at the seat of Sitapur. It is located in central Uttar Pradesh. The BJP had won this seat, or has been winning it since 2014. They were considered unbeatable on the seat. So much so that the opposition could not find a candidate to contest. The Samajwadi Party got the seat first. They offered it to a 6-time state lawmaker, but he said no. So the SP offered the seat to the Congress party. The Congress offered it to a former minister. He too refused. On the third attempt, the opposition finally found a candidate, an obscure leader with no track record. And guess what? He won by almost 90,000 votes. It tells a story, doesn't it? Now we come to the fourth factor, sidelining of the state leadership. Apparently, a central committee decided on the tickets. They dropped many sitting MPs in UP, and some of them were not even told personally. They got to know from the candidate list. Clearly not a good strategy. In states like UP, local leadership matters. Some politicians have strangleholds over certain voters and regions. If you antagonize them, it can backfire. Which brings us to the final factor, distress among young voters. Most of them opposed the BJP's Agnipath scheme. They also had issues with the constant paper leaks. It's a major problem there. Millions of candidates often fight for a few dozen government jobs. It's seen as a ticket to welfare. But when question papers leak, the whole exam goes for a toss. It's either cancelled or postponed. So these five factors may have contributed to the BJP's setback in UP. They did have some positives in the state. For example, law and order has certainly improved. But voters prioritized the economy more this time. And here's the problem. Things could get even worse for the BJP. This time they had a handy vote cutter in most seats. That's the BSP, or the Bahujan Samaj Party. They did not join either of the alliances. And that actually helped the BJP. There are 16 seats where the BSP could have defeated the BJP. How? By joining the India bloc. Take the example of Aligarh. The BJP won the seat by 15,000 votes. But the BSP got more than 123,000 votes there, 123,000 votes. So what if the BSP had joined the India bloc? The BJP would have lost. There are 16 seats like this in the state of Uttar Pradesh. What if the BJP had lost them all? Then their tally would have come down to 224. So the voters, to 24, the voters of Uttar Pradesh have sent a clear message to the party. You need to step up your game. The state BJP unit held a review meeting today, and they have time to take stock and prepare. Because UP's assembly elections are slated for 2027, it should make for a very exciting contest. We've discussed the politics, we've talked about the huddles, we've told you about the demands. Now let's take a look at the new Lok Sabha, the lower house of the Indian Parliament. It has elected 543 members of Parliament. Together, they will make up the 18th Lok Sabha of India. What will that look like? Will it be a younger Lok Sabha? How many women MPs are there? How many of them are first-timers? How many of them are multi-millionaires? And how many MPs have criminal cases against them? Our next report brings you all these numbers and more.
17th April 1952. The first Lok Sabha was constituted in India. That's the lower house of Parliament. India's first Parliament was a mixed bag. Youth, experience, lawyers, agriculturists, but only 24 women. 72 years later, India is all set for another new Lok Sabha. 642 million people voted in 7 phases to elect 543 members of Parliament. So what does the 18th Lok Sabha look like? For starters, it does have more women, 74 of them. Of course, it's increased since 1952, but women still make up only 13.6% of the Lok Sabha. This is despite women accounting for nearly 50% of India's population. Plus, the numbers are lower than 2019. That's when 78 women were elected to the Lok Sabha. The state sending the most female representatives to Lok Sabha is West Bengal. It has 42 seats and has elected 11 women. They're all from Mamata Banerjee-led Trinamool Congress. Then there's youth. India's new Lok Sabha will be younger than before. The average age of the 17th Lok Sabha was 59. The average age of the new one will be 56. 11% of MPs are 40 years or younger. 3 of the MPs are 25 years old. So it is younger. But when you compare it to India's population, it may feel old. Remember, the median age in India is only around 28 years. Which brings us to the new members. This Lok Sabha has retained quite a few of the old faces, but there will be a lot of new members, around 280 of them. Together, they make up 52% of the Lok Sabha. This includes former chief ministers, film stars, political activists, and a former High Court judge. And what do the rest of the MPs do? The most common professions among the newly elected members are agriculture and social work. 7% of them are lawyers, 4% are medical practitioners, 93% of them are also millionaires. 504 candidates out of 543 have assets worth more than 1 crore Indian rupees. But not all of them have a clean record. 251 members face criminal charges. That's 46% of the new Lok Sabha. Out of them, 31% have serious criminal cases against them. That's 170 MPs. They are involved in cases related to rape, murder and kidnapping. So that's what India's new Lok Sabha looks like. It's younger, it has more first-time members, more millionaires, but fewer women. And definitely more people with criminal cases against them. So it's truly a mixed bag.
Now let's take a look at the US. It has a new problem on its hands. Russia has now officially called the United States an enemy nation. This came from the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov. Let me read out the translation of what he said. And we are an enemy country for them, much like they are for us. Again, that was the Kremlin spokesperson, and this is the first time he said enemy, because it's not something to be said lightly. Now, you know that Washington and Moscow have never seen eye to eye. They've been on opposite sides in a number of conflicts, most recently in Ukraine. But through 2 years of the Ukraine war, Moscow went out of its way to avoid calling the US an enemy state. Just look at Peskov again. Barely 3 months ago, he said that the US was not the enemy, that Russia did not have any anti-American sentiments. But that has changed now. Why? Perhaps because of last week's escalation. Last week, the United States gave Ukraine a green light to strike Russian territory using American weapons. Ukraine has already begun doing so. They're using American weapons to strike inside Russia, and Russia is furious. Putin says Ukraine is striking Russian territory with the help of Western specialists.
The missile strikes against Russia are done by the Western specialists. We have no illusions about that. What must we do in response? First of all, we will improve our air defense systems to destroy the missiles. Secondly, we think that if someone thinks it is possible to supply such weapons to a combat zone to strike at our territory and create problems for us, why do we not have the right to supply our weapons of the same class to those regions of the world where there will be strikes on the sensitive facilities of those countries that are doing this against Russia?
You heard what he said. Basically, Putin has threatened to turn the tables, to send Russian weapons to Western enemies, long-range weapons that could strike sensitive facilities in the West. And this means that Western enemies could get the ability to strike them at will. It would be a security nightmare for the Western nations that are helping Ukraine.
In the end, if we see that these countries become involved in a war against us, what they are doing makes them directly involved in a war against the Russian Federation, we reserve the right to act the same way. Overall, it leads to some serious problems.
That was Putin's threat. But he isn't just content with that. He's also going for a show of force. Russia is sending combat vessels to the Caribbean Sea, to America's doorstep. Russia will participate in naval exercises in the Caribbean, along with Cuba and possibly Venezuela. Russian aircraft may also be deployed in the region and won't stop there. Here is what US officials have said, and I'm quoting, "We anticipate that this summer Russia will conduct heightened naval and air activity near the United States. These actions will culminate in a global Russian naval exercise this fall." Now, Russia regularly conducts drills in America's backyard, but this time they're expected to be quote-unquote heightened. And the drills will continue for weeks, if not months. This is clearly muscle flexing. Russia wants to show that even while it is busy with Ukraine, it has firepower to spare, and that it can hurt any enemy anywhere in the world. All of this posturing is reminiscent of a different era, of the Cold War, when Russia and the US were constantly on the brink of war, and the rest of us were hoping to not be caught in the nuclear fallout. The world does not need to go back to the Cold War era. Russia and the West need to de-escalate and let the cooler heads prevail. And while Russia positions itself firmly against the West, it is also looking out for its friends in other parts of the world. Yesterday, the Russian foreign minister concluded a diplomatic tour, a tour of West and Central Africa. Sergei Lavrov visited 4 countries: Guinea, the Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso and Chad. Do you know what connects these nations besides geographical proximity? They're all former French colonies. And all of these nations have problems with the West. Russia is using this to make inroads, to edge out Western troops in Africa. Let's start with Guinea. Guinea is run by a military junta. The country saw a coup in 2021. The West condemned the coup. They supported sanctions on Guinea, sanctions by a bloc of West African nations. The sanctions brought difficulties to Guinea, but they did not succeed in ousting the junta. So they were lifted earlier this year. The sanctions were lifted, but by then the economic damage to Guinea had been done. And what does Russia do? Listen to this.
Our companies operating in Guinea benefit from the good conditions created by your government. We hope that this mutually beneficial interaction will continue.
Russia is doubling down on its trade with Guinea. After this, Lavrov went to the Republic of Congo. We don't know the exact details of what was discussed, but the talks were supposed to revolve around 2 things: trade and military cooperation. Trade between the 2 countries has reportedly soared off late. Multiple Russian firms have bases in the ROC, the Republic of Congo. One company, Lukoil, is working to export the country's liquefied natural gas. On the military front, Russia has signed a deal with the ROC in 2019. Russian military specialists, that's what they call them, military specialists, are active in the country, and they are in talks, and there are talks of defense sales as well from Russia to the Republic of Congo. So Russia is also looking to expand these military ties. After the Republic of Congo, Lavrov went to Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is another coup-hit West African nation. It saw back-to-back coups in the year 2022, and it's currently ruled by a military junta. The junta took control and promised security. Burkina Faso has been facing a terrorist insurgency for years. The previous elected government was trying to fight this with help from Western nations like France. But progress was slow. And Burkina Faso's military got tired of waiting, so they overthrew the elected government and decided to fight the insurgents themselves. A few months after the coup, the junta decided to expel French troops. Burkina Faso did not want to host its former colonizers' soldiers. But the country still needed help against the terrorist insurgency, so it turned to Russia. And Moscow has been supporting the junta ever since. Lavrov reiterated that support this week.
The Russian instructors are working here and their number will increase. At the same time, we provide training to the representatives of Burkina Faso armed forces and law enforcement agencies in the Russian Federation.
Russia's military presence in Burkina Faso is set to grow. Burkinabe troops will also be trained in Russia, so their partnership will expand, much to the dismay of countries like France. The final stop on Lavrov's Africa tour was Chad. Now, Chad is a bit different from all these other Sahel states. It has always been friendly with the West, but that looks to be changing. Chad recently asked the US to remove its troops from the country. The withdrawal talks are ongoing, but this signals a shift for Chad, a shift away from the West. And now Lavrov has paid a visit, reportedly to talk about combating terrorism and expanding military ties. So don't be surprised if Chad becomes the next country to get Russian advisors. Lavrov's goal seems to have been simple: boost Russia's presence in Africa at the expense of Western interests. Basically, Russia is edging out Western troops. It is actively trying to replace French and American boots on the ground and become the premier security provider to Africa. That would undo decades of Western influence and make Russia the go-to alternative to the West for African nations. And the African nations provide Russia with something too. They are a new set of allies for Moscow at an increasingly hostile global stage. Now on to the war in Gaza. Last month, Israel struck a refugee camp. It killed displaced Gazans. There was global outrage. Countries called for peace, but nothing changed. And today, Israel has struck a UN-linked school in central Gaza. It was housing displaced Palestinians. 40 people were killed. More than 70 are injured. The United Nations has called the strike horrific. But Israel says this school was housing a Hamas compound, so it was a legitimate target. This comes amid a renewed push for peace talks, but neither Hamas nor Israel seem willing to compromise. Our next report tells you more.
It's day 244 of the Gaza war. So far, 36,000 people have been killed. 85% of Gazans have been displaced. 62% homes have been destroyed. 26 hospitals have been crippled. 4 UN resolutions have been vetoed, and amid all this, the bombing has continued. On Thursday, Israel bombed a school in Gaza. It was linked to the United Nations. The school was housing displaced Palestinians. The strike killed at least 40 people. 70 Palestinians were also wounded.
My son called us at 2:30 in the morning to say that a Hamid had been martyred. They hit them with a missile in the classroom in the school. We came here. We have been awake and have not slept until now.
Before we went into the rooms to sleep, I went up to my room. There was a hit on the second floor. It hit the third floor and came down to the second, and it led to the killing and martyrdom. It led to the death. Thank God for everything.
Israel's military has confirmed the bombing. It says its fighter jets struck the school. But Israel alleges the school housed a Hamas compound. It says that its strike killed Hamas members. Israel accuses Hamas and its allies in Gaza of using civilian infrastructure as operational centers. This includes schools, hospitals, and even facilities run by the United Nations. It's a charge that both Hamas and the UN have denied. But it's not just the school. Israeli warplanes also carried out strikes in parts of Rafah. This comes as peace talks resumed in Doha. Last week, Biden outlined a peace plan for Gaza. The 3-phase plan includes a halt in fighting for 6 weeks, a hostage prisoner swap, and delivery of aid to Gaza. G7 backed this deal, and so did the Arab states. But nothing happened. Hamas insisted on a permanent truce and a full Israeli withdrawal, demands that Israel has rejected. And while the peace talks continue, it looks like patience is running thin. Take this example. At a meeting between the US Secretary of State and Arab officials, where UAE officials were also present to discuss post-war strategy, a report suggests that the meeting turned into a shouting match. The Emirati foreign minister reportedly called the Palestinian leadership Ali Baba and the 40 thieves. That led to a heated exchange. So clearly things are escalating, both on the ground and in the diplomatic corridors. There's a renewed push for peace after months of stalled negotiations. But the war continues to drag on. Israel says it's striving for a total victory. It will not stop until Hamas is destroyed and its hostages are released. Meanwhile, Hamas has accused Israel of dragging its feet on a ceasefire deal. With both sides unwilling to compromise, ordinary Gazans are left to pay the price with their lives.
Now let's talk about Shehbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister of Pakistan. He's on a 5-day visit to China. Before departing for Beijing, Sharif declared that Pakistan's ties with China are unbreakable. But is the feeling mutual? We ask because Beijing has been dragging its heels on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. Pakistan wants more funds for this project, but China is non-committal. Islamabad also wants an extension on more than $15 billion worth of Chinese debt. Will Beijing agree to these demands? Our next report explores.
Shehbaz Sharif landed in China earlier this week. His first stop was Shenzhen, a major Chinese tech hub. He couldn't help but admire the progress in the city.
A few decades ago, it was a small fishing farmers' village. And today, its GDP is hovering around $500 billion. Is it not a miracle of this century? And this shows what? It's a lesson to be learned by all of us.
Sharif is making all the right noises for his hosts. This visit is critical for him. 2 key items are on agenda. The first one is the launch of the second phase of CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. On paper, this sounds like an expansion, but on the ground it is a different story. Since last year, China has slowed its investments into Pakistan. CPEC projects have been running behind schedule. In 2022, 80% of them were delayed. Sharif is now seeking an overhaul.
We would like to have a different dialogue this time with our great friend China to have investments in feasible projects, promote B2B dialogue, and transform CPEC into a new level.
His problems don't end there. Pakistan's economy remains fragile and Sharif is leaning on China to pull through. Reports say he is seeking a fresh loan from Beijing. A chimerical loan of around $600 million. Beijing has already refused this request once before when Pakistan failed to honor its old dues. Islamabad owes some $15 billion worth of payments to Beijing. These are energy bills from power companies. In the run-up to Sharif's visit, Pakistan expedited some of these payments to manage the rest of the dues. Pakistan is seeking an extension from China. If Beijing agrees, Pakistan could repay these dues in 5 years. Islamabad is desperate for this relief. It has approached the International Monetary Fund or the IMF for a fresh loan. But a new relief package won't materialize until Pakistan finds a way to rework its debts with China. So the stakes are high for Shehbaz Sharif. While he has taken charge once again, Pakistan's fortunes though remain the same. Firmly in the hands of Beijing.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Normandy, world leaders honor veterans at the D-Day ceremony. In South Korea, activists launch balloons carrying pen drives with K-pop music and drama towards the north. And Boeing launches astronauts for the first time, acting as a taxi service for NASA. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1984, the Indian Army stormed the Golden Temple. In Operation Blue Star, the aim was to flush out Sikh separatist leader Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale and his followers. It was ordered by India's then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. The operation was a shock to India's Sikh minority. She was later assassinated in 1984 by her Sikh bodyguard. We leave you on that note. Thank you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying 2 American heroes.
Commander Butch, rumor they're calling.